In this episode, we are going to talk about the possibility of a SpaceX Tesla merger, what that means for shareholders, how to think about it, why it possibly could happen, why it might not happen. But again, more importantly, we're going to close and stick around with how to think of it if you're a Tesla or a potential SpaceX shareholder. I'm Tom, the Investing Tiger. Thank you so much for listening. Hit the subscribe button and like button to make sure that you continue to get my take on all things SpaceX, Tesla, and what's going on in the space economy. So we're a month in now with SpaceX as a publicly traded company, and I have done a lot of reading, a lot of thinking on what this could possibly mean if SpaceX and Tesla merge. And I think there's two or three competing stories that when you sift through them on the surface, they make a lot of sense. It comes down to what you want to believe. So let's get the bull case out of the way, or at least the bullish case in the sense that both companies merge. They merge pretty quickly. I see the Kalshi odds and Polymarket odds 50, 60, 70%. Those are the betting odds that we will see a merger within the first 12 months. And then I look at the rationale, like what actually drives those. Very believable, but it could be a little simplistic. So full disclosure, I have been a long-term Tesla shareholder, building out the position actively. And I call myself a future SpaceX shareholder. I'll tell you what that means in a minute. But operationally, why a merger could happen, I think it makes total sense, is the operational integration. On paper, this is the paper case. It makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. They are so connected in just an on-the-ground reality. Engineering talent, projects that they're working on, Terafab, which is the big semiconductor hub for AI, that's going to power EVs, robo-taxis, Optimus. And you think about SpaceX, their optimal AI satellites, which, by the way, SpaceX just filed a request with the FCC for, is it 1 million satellites in space? So they're thinking big. That's going to need a lot of fill in the blank AI chips, everything in between. So there's that operational integration that's needed. And we'll go on and say the other big reason I think it makes sense is the AI robotics really is the glue. JP Morgan recently put out a note, and they call a combination obviously strategically coherent. This is the case where it just makes so much sense on paper. Think about it in another analogy. I like to think of investing in other things I know about. So in this case, it's sports. Like a team looks great on paper. They should win the championship. But we know paper outcomes don't always lead to actual outcomes. So this is where I say sometimes it could be a little bit simplistic, and you'll see where I'm going with it in a second. But of course, it would allow Elon Musk, both operational companies, a degree of achieving the vision, the mission, all the engineering integration. Bloomberg, they model suggests that AI orbital data centers, satellites could become SpaceX's largest revenue driver. Probably will, much more so than launch, at least near term. But the AI-driven autonomy and robots become Tesla's course, will end up becoming potentially Tesla's core story as well, not just building cars. We've talked about that in a couple of episodes. I'll put a link to those episodes out there. But another big factor is the financials. Numbers help tell the story and make things happen. I totally get it. This is where, from a CFO standpoint, it just makes total sense. We would end up talking about the better part of a $4 trillion company, two separate companies, SpaceX and Tesla coming together. Let me check my math. A little bit under $4 trillion at current market levels coming together. There'd be so much integration across the technology that they're sharing, the AI compute. But where this really gets complicated, I think, from a financial standpoint, we now know SpaceX does have the currency to pull this off, over an $85 billion cash raise in the IPO. We've got another large bond offering. They had a debt offering, raised cash, very heavy cash burn, but they could pull off an all-cash deal. This makes sense now. It is in the S1. Just general language, this gives us the opportunity to pull off a large acquisition if needed. So it's kind of mysterious, like a Nostradamus type prediction. You can assign what you want to believe in it. And I think that very well could happen. There's another big dynamic now. We're going to talk about this. This is, well, if this happens, what does it mean to Tesla? What does it mean as a Tesla shareholder? And this is where the deal mechanics, I think, get real interesting. So a lot of analysts have been saying there is probably a 20, 30, some people peg a 40% takeover premium. So that what that means is if you are a Tesla shareholder, SpaceX acquires Tesla, it could be a likely premium on the news of a 20, 30, 40% bump. Sounds pretty good. I want to believe that, but markets are pretty efficient. And I think there's a level of maybe some of that is already priced in, like no big surprise. The possibility, if there's a 50% possibility, there's a 30% premium, you'd have to think the markets are pricing that in, and they have been. I think we see that this week in the price action. Tesla's taken a big hit. SpaceX has taken a big hit. And I'm going to touch on that in a minute. But I think a little bit that's breakdown. So let's talk a couple minutes about like why I think this might not happen, or why that easy path like makes total sense. The financials make sense. Operational efficiency makes sense. Just do it. Make it happen. But this is where I think there's a little bit of difficulty in having the deal pull off. And it really comes down to the least favorite thing as an investor. Sometimes it's that regulatory standpoint, and specifically national security. So let's play this out. What do I mean? So right now, as an integrated company, if Tesla and SpaceX were to integrate, what this means is Tesla is now got a little bit more of a green light in China with FSD and rolling out there. So that technology exists in China. SpaceX has government contracts, national defense contracts. The lines can get blurred. And I think that's a realistic thing to account for, that if a merger is announced or it's attempted to be announced, there's going to have to be a regulatory consideration right there. So to me, that's the biggest obstacle I'd see on any type of announcement of actual approval. Would this actually be permitted? What type of gates would Tesla have to put up, or SpaceX have to put up, to ensure that there's not a national security compromise? I think it's a real important thing to look at. The other thing is both these companies have the potential to burn cash, and burn cash pretty quickly. Now, we definitely know that to be the case with SpaceX, right? So they're probably going to burn $100 billion of cash between now and the early 2030s. Might actually be a little bit higher on that with launch, putting satellites in space and all that. Tesla is burning cash, will burn cash from an Optimus, building out infrastructure like what they're doing with the Terafab facility, things of that nature. Continuing to roll that out, getting ready for Optimus. But I do love the cash flow from building cars, FSD subscriptions that Tesla does bring to the table. It is cash flow positive, margins are improving. Then the final thing I want to say is like this, the governance, the shareholder politics. So think of it yourself. If you're a Tesla shareholder, I've seen so many comments on X related to this where Tesla shareholders are like, I'm not sure if I even want this to happen. Things are just about to, it looks like, come together. The catalyst, we're on the precipice of maybe Optimus, FSD, Cybercab all rolling out. Now we're going to merge. We've waited for a couple of years. So I think there's a little bit of governance, valuation, and shareholder politics that will be come in place. Who's the larger shareholders of both companies? Just to level set there, it is Elon Musk, about 80-85% for SpaceX, and 20-something% for Tesla right now. So that's kind of how it all shakes out. So I always like to do a sanity check, and this is kind of how I would think about it if I were as an investor and thinking about it. I like to do sanity checks on my thesis. What do I mean by that? What I like to do is I'll look at the most bullish case and sometimes the most bearish case. And I'm going to focus on the most bearish case here in a second, or a bearish analyst. So there's one analyst at BNP, James Piccirillo, and I like to look at his logic a little bit more to stress test my thesis. So my thesis is, I think between now and 2030 on both companies, we're going to see material build out that should see an appreciable valuation change in the stock. Oh, and by the way, with SpaceX, all this mumbo jumbo, the noise of the day, think of it as a generational opportunity. And I think the key word most people miss is generational. This is not going to take place. This is not going to fully transform itself this quarter, next quarter. Don't lose sight of the word generational. I think that helps me think through it a little bit more. This is truly a generational opportunity. All right, so let's go back. James Piccarello, BNP. He's an analyst that's been covering. I'm going to share you some coverage that he put out in, it was about October of last year. This was before, obviously, SpaceX went public, before it went public, and there was merger talk. But I'd like to get a lens on like he thinks of the stock, how he's thinking about it here. So this is an article from investing.com, and he has a underperform on the stock. So that's BNP's term. I think most of the street would call that a hold. And he is projecting the following things on robotaxi for Tesla: 525,000 vehicles by 2030. I kind of believe that. I think that's low. By 2040, 17 million Optimus robot deliveries. I want us to start seeing the first before I make a call. 2040, a 14-year target, is nothing more than a guess for me. And 11 million active FSD subscriptions by 2030. I think that's quite possible. We're going to close in on probably 2 million pretty quickly in the next few quarters would be my guess. But he has been overall, I would say, bearish on the stock. He's on the lower end. He had a Tesla price target of 307, and his comments on a merger are just as equally bearish. So I discount a lot of what he's saying, but I also discount a lot of the bullish notes that I see out on the stock, things that are so bullish that in the next year or 2 years, all this is going to play out and work out extremely profitably. I talked about it before. When I listen to Tesla content that's a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, and I don't know the date, it almost sounds like the same story that we're seeing now. I think the only thing different on Tesla at the moment is we're close. We're really close to seeing a Cybercab announcement, a little bit more rollout there. We're getting closer on Optimus. And those things, those catalysts, we're probably quarters away from it happening instead of years away from it happening now. But there is a little bit of a boy cried wolf story sometimes, and I totally get it for my large Tesla shareholders out there that you've been holding it a long time. It just cannot break out of this range. I think from a range-bound standpoint, we're getting close. Not financial advice, just my analysis and take on what I'm seeing. So SpaceX is an interesting thing right now. I'm going to cut back to that. And then I'm going to close with how to think about this as a SpaceX or Tesla shareholder. So SpaceX, I put out that, hey, this might not break the 135 IPO price. That call, I put 60% odds that would not happen. And that did not play out. Obviously, this week we traded down to the 127. Who knows where we go from here? My general storyline plays out. I've got a couple episodes on that specifically. But what I think we'll see happen, and my base case has been and continues to be 85 to 115 is a real comfortable buy zone for me. That's where I'm going to be doing my buying. I think here in the 120s, 130, you're not going to get hurt long term, but I can wait. I know I'm going to have to wait while I own it. I can also wait to buy it. I'm not going to completely miss the train on that. So the complicated thing that I've been thinking about before SpaceX went public, and maybe you're thinking about this too, and I'd love to hear any thoughts, comments, notes you have on this, drop them in there. I'm a Tesla shareholder. I'm a SpaceX shareholder. What does that mean? I own Tesla. Should I buy SpaceX? I own SpaceX. I'm going to buy SpaceX. Do I want to own Tesla? So my general rule of thumb is I'm comfortable owning both. I really don't care if either merge or anytime soon. My bet on Tesla is not that they merge with SpaceX. My bet with SpaceX is not that they merge with Tesla. I view them as two separate, completely operating entities. If they merge, they merge. If they don't, so it's would I buy one without the other? I can answer affirmatively to both of them. That is one way to look at it. That's how I would think about it, not just with this, just as a general investing, just kind of a general investing rule of thumb. So this is interesting. I recorded this in July of 2026. We'll see how this holds up in July 2027, see where we are. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you in the next episode. Hit subscribe and the like button. Thank you.